Welcome to Discover Indie Film. I'm your host, Jeff Howard, and I'm very excited. In person, I have filmmaker Ari Groobman with me. Hey, Ari.
Hi, how are you?
I am good, and I'm glad you're here. We are doing this podcast because, and this is a nice turnaround because I met you last November at the Sherman Oaks Film Festival because your film, essentially Amy, I'm now going to name all the awards. Maybe,
Go ahead, please.
I assume you won't find it embarrassing, but I guess we could start with the Grand Jury Award for Best Lead Actress for Stacy Chu.
Oh, she's great. Yeah, Stacy's great.
Wonderful performance. Yeah. And then the Filmmakers Awards, which I believe I told you at some point, those are decided by a jury of filmmakers who had films at the festival in previous years.
Which I thought was really cool. I hadn't seen that in a lot of other festivals before, and I think that's a really cool way to do it.
It's a cool way to do it, and it's a cool way to have a better age range of jury member and a better diversity of jury members. So I love it. And plus, it's decided by your peers.
Yeah, exactly. The people who are also working right now, too, and trying to break in as well.
Yeah, so they appreciate what you did. And guess what? So that jury of your peers gave essentially Amy Outstanding Short Film Drama, Outstanding Director Drama, that's you, and Outstanding Performance by a Cast. Because I have to say, totally well-deserved because the whole cast, everyone just brings something.
That was thanks a lot to my partner, Liz, actually, who you met as well. She did the whole casting for everything, and she was great. I have like decision fatigue, so it's kind of, I describe it as like going to an ice cream shop. I like an ice cream shop that has maybe like 10 flavors. When they have like 20 flavors, it's too much for me. And so when we like submitted the roles, I remember, I think I submitted it on Actors Access and Backstage. And within a day, I think we got like 90 submissions, and I was just so overwhelmed. And I was like, I don't want to have to go through every single one of these like videos and like profiles. And Liz was like, I'll do it. And I was like, you sure? Like, I don't want to like pass the buck to you. And she was like, no, I like doing that. And I'm like, it just blew my mind. And it's great because we kind of have different wavelengths in that. And she was able to go through them, and she narrowed it down to a few. And we finally picked out the couple, and they were great. They were so great. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I have to admit, I would be on your team on that, I think, because casting used to be having people come into the room one after another and then like waiting till you see something. That's one thing. But getting like homework style where you just get like a ton of emails and each with a video attached or whatever, that sounds way more difficult.
And some of it, they were really weird. And I don't think people talk about this. At least I wasn't aware of it until I actually had to do it. But like there's a lot of people who just don't read the prompt. And they just like mass apply, I guess. And that makes sense. But I was getting roles for like Korean supermarket owner from like, age range 30 to 40. From like 18-year-olds, and I'm like, no, you're not a supermarket owner. Like, I'm sorry. Or somehow some people would like find my personal email address and send me direct emails, and I'm like, and they're like, I've never acted before, but please give me a chance. And I'm like I'd like to, but please do it through, like, please don't contact me through my personal information. That's just kind of, I don't know. I feel like that crosses a boundary.
For sure. Huge boundary crossed. But before I'm going to jump back because we're already talking about casting and stuff with Amy. No, you can do anything you want on this podcast. There are no fucking rules here. As we discussed in advance, we can curse, we can do anything we want.
Cool.
But I'm just going to I'll mention it all at the end. But I already warned you that what I always do on Discover Indie Film on this podcast is find out where it all began, how you got started.
Yeah.
So you want to just tell your personal history?
Oh, boy.
You don't have to do your whole history. You don't have to go back to, although, my God, dear listener, podcast world out there, Ari was telling me about his great grandmother and shit, and that's fascinating. But I definitely think that should be another podcast someday. Yeah. We can maybe we'll start a whole different thing.
Our whole family is wild. Like I think on my dad's side, we had like one person who was involved in the Jewish mafia at one point in Chicago. It's wild. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in Colorado. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. I came from like a Jewish and Chinese family. So, like it's funny because in both Chinese culture and in Jewish culture, the arts are very well appreciated. However, it's not encouraged as a career. And so in China, like on the Chinese side of my family, I grew up watching tons of like Chinese opera and listening to traditional music, and same thing on my dad's side, who grew up, and he was born in 1947. So he grew up as a poor Jewish kid in Southside Chicago. So he went to like old black blues bars and would listen to some of like the classic old blues. And so I grew up listening to just so much of just rich old music as well, and he would show me all these old films from back in those days, and they were always very encouraged. But as I got older, they, again, they were like, well, you gotta, you go become a lawyer or a doctor.
Yeah,
or
you're gonna do lawyer, doctor. Yeah, what graduate degree are you getting? What career are you choosing that will please us?
Yeah,
and they infused you with the arts. And you could not deny your attraction towards it.
Yeah, I mean,
But did it manifest really early? Like
it did. I have, I'm considered disabled. I have borderline personality disorder. And long story short, on my mother's side, my mother was abusive. So we're no longer on speaking terms, but growing up, it wasn't really super easy. So a lot of times I would have outlets through creative means. And, because of my upbringing, I wasn't very socially integrated. Like part of that was like the kind of coming from my mother's side. I just didn't, I wasn't brought to many school events or like interacted with many kids. So I spent a lot of time alone. And so doing that, like I kind of found ways to, get lost in movies, get lost in those worlds. It was very immersive for me, and that kind of parasocial relationships, but also finding ways to express myself in ways that like I couldn't maybe communicate to other people at the time. So I would try and, I would love to draw or write poetry or, make short skits, pretty much anything. I mean, growing up also, I did a lot of performative stuff. So I used to be a street magician. So,
by the way, my reaction and the way you are the second person in the last couple of months who wrote and directed a film, but actually started with some magic.
Oh yeah, okay.
An actual like working magician as in high school.
Yeah,
it was this guy's story.
It kind of started off as a way to, because again, I grew up pretty bullied. And so I was very socially awkward, and I really didn't know how to talk to people. So it was
bullied at home and at school.
Yeah, so double whammy. It's okay. I always said like weird kids make really cool adults. So it's that trauma bonding. But I have a great therapist, by the way. So anyone out there who's listening, don't worry if you got trauma. Therapy really helps. I love my therapist. Shout out to Michelle.
And you shouldn't give up if the first therapist doesn't click.
Oh, it's like dating. It's very much like, because there's so many different, I think I've been through, 30 therapists in my life, and I'm only 25. So like you find the one that works. And Michelle's been so helpful and so great. But because I didn't know how to, interact with people at the time in like middle school, I started off with with performance yo-yo, like trick yo-yoing and it got a lot of good reception at my middle school talent show. So I'm like, okay, I got to do something different. And so I picked up magic, and that was the one that kind of stuck around for a while. And I did that. I did a lot of performance like around school or youth events or on the street. And I didn't make a lot of money because apparently you need a permit at the outdoor mall. So I would perform long enough until the cops showed up. So,
right, and then you pick up the money in the box and
then
run.
Move somewhere else. I did that a lot, and I love the performance aspect of it. And I also used to be a stage hypnotist. My dad was a hypnotherapist back in the day. I was having this conversation with my Liz and my roommate Eileen. I one of the biggest motivators in my life is spite. So maybe it's not the best thing to say, but when I was a kid,
I want to joke. Ari and I have shared. We both have some Jewish roots, so being inspired by spite is as Jewish as bagels and lox,
pretty
right?
much. And I asked my dad one time. I was like, would he teach me hypnotherapy, hypnosis? Because I didn't believe him. I didn't believe it worked. And he was like, no, I'm not going to teach you. So in spite of me, fuck it, I'm going to do it myself. And I just bought a DVD and I read a bunch of books, and then I tried for a while and I failed and I kept trying. And then eventually I was able to hypnotize somebody, and then I was able to do it over and over and over again. And then my dad full out admitted it. He was like, I got better than he was. And those who with hypnosis, by the way, hypnosis, if you watch the Penn and Teller episode, bullshit. It was an old episode of series that they did. But it's true. It's the art of bullshitting yourself. Hypnosis is real, but it works in the same way that meditation works. You basically put someone in a deep state of meditation where their mind is relaxed to a point where they're open to suggestions. So, because when your mind is awake and active, you're filtering out. It's like I think in the book or the DVD how I learned it's like a bodyguard. So it's constantly filtering what information goes in and out and what to accept and not accept. When you meditate somebody, or hypnosis, when you put someone to sleep, you're essentially putting them into a meditative state. And there are different ways of doing it. But when you put them in a meditative state, they're more open to suggestions. And everyone can be hypnotized, but some people can be hypnotized faster than others. That's why if you see on a stage, they'll go through a couple people, send a couple people off stage.
It was a big thing in the late 80s, at bars or clubs, to bring in a hypnotist, up at Universal City Walk and shit. They would just, I was always kicked off that stage early, man. I guess the doorman in my brain does his job too well.
It's also about being open to it, and that's part of it.
I always wanted it, but I guess wanting it is a bad thing.
Wanting it, but also there's a level of skepticism. I was never able to be hypnotized by other people. I was able to hypnotize other people, but I couldn't be hypnotized because in my head I was like, I know what you're doing, and so I couldn't relax or give into it to allow myself to be. It's a kind of you allow the person to hypnotize you. It's an act of trust in a way. But it is, yeah, it's really fun. And that's why I did it. It was so fascinating psychologically, and it ties very closely to magic and psychologically how people perceive things, and misdirection, sleight of hand. Those were my favorites. Gimmicks were always fun, but they're always they break, they're expensive. With sleight of hand, you could always just do whatever you have on hand, and it works on mainly psychology, and that's what I loved about it. But I did that with the magic. I did juggling, and I just loved performing. And then throughout high school, I left my mom's house when I was around 12, and, I went through early therapy. And in doing so, I went to a school called Fairview High School, which is in Boulder, and it was a pressure cooker. Fucking hell, man. It was designed by a prison architect. So it literally, people say high school's a prison, it literally was designed by a prison architect. So there were so few windows. The halls were like almost a labyrinth. Like I got lost for like the first month because it was just so confusing of like, I'd be somehow start at the bottom and I'm like, why am I at the gym now? I'm trying to get to math. But that school within the district, there was a program called IB and AP. Like people know AP, but some schools have IB. It stands for International Baccalaureate.
I only know that because my nephew did it.
Yeah, it is.
It's for the smartest kids, but like you're saying, it's a pressure cooker.
It's a crock of shit. It's a crock of shit.
But there is a sorting. It is the smartest kids together in it, even if it's a crock, right?
That's a generous term.
You're being modest.
I'm very, very anti. I guess
you're anti-IB.
Anti-IB. My whole family has a whole history of being very anti-authority. So, when I was in it, it's just a lot of material. And it's the same thing with like standardized testing. If you're good at testing, you're good at AP. If you're good at testing, you're good at IB. It really doesn't, and a lot of the modern school system doesn't really, measure a lot of different types of intelligence as well as the different ways it can manifest. So, like, the way I say it is, like, if you've ever worked in the restaurant industry, so I used to do fine dining before coming out here, and I worked behind the bar, but I would work with the chefs as well. And if you've ever talked to a really passionate chef, the level of knowledge that they have on the chemistry, like I remember having one conversation with my good friend Anthony, who's a really accomplished chef, and he just opened up like a new Louisiana kitchen in Colorado. Gotta look for it, but if I remember, I'll say it. But he named it after a breed of Louisiana dog, which he also owns. Great dog too, but. I remember I was making a syrup with persimmons, and he was showing me how to do it better. And he started going through a whole bunch of like, this is how you extract it from water, oil, alcohol. And this was literally the material that I learned in advanced chemical biological engineering, which is what I went to school for, which was oil extraction, liquid extraction. And here he was talking about it in such extreme detail. But he never went to school for it. He never went to school for engineering, but he knew that. And so, again, that's why I'm just like kind of anti like AP, IB, and like standardized testing, because I got lucky. I'm good at testing, and I was able to kind of move my way through the system. But my friend, like some of my friends who were very, very smart, very hardworking, very creative, they couldn't do testing, and they would always, do poorly, and it would show like on their GPA. But when I would always choose them to work together in group projects because I knew how good they were at like research and
you knew that back then. You understood because I'm like you. I could get I would have a B+ in AP biology and then be the only person to get a 5 on the test because I'm just a good test taker, or the tests are written by people like me who think like me. So yeah, there's test bias.
We did a huge protest actually at our school in high school, and it was like they were trying to do another standardized test while we were seniors, and it was a new thing, and we were like, no, we're not taking this, and we stood out in like -2-degree weather to protest it. I think only like 2 kids actually ended up taking it in the entire senior class, so it worked. And they didn't implement it, which I was very grateful for. But that whole school was just like constantly putting kids under pressure. Kids were getting hospitalized for panic attacks and stress.
Were they pounding kids, like teaching the test because all they cared about was what the average test score was out of the school?
But it was not just tests. It was even like the fucking choir, the horror stories I heard from the choir room, or like the performances in like the musical theater department. And I never did theater throughout high school, which was I loved acting in like plays, but I can't sing to save my life. So,
and it was only musical theater, the drama department.
I hit puberty, and that was the end of that career. So They only did musicals, so I was like, okay, well, can't do that. But same thing with our sports team. They were just like, they wanted the kids to just like perform, and it became such a culture that, like, again, kids were like trying to early on, like, humble bragging and trying to one up each other. And I'm like, guys, this is just so bad. And it was causing me so much anxiety. And I'm like, I'm trying to like check out of that. And then in doing so, while I was overcoming a lot of the trauma from my mom's house, one of my teachers and family friends and mentors was inviting me to like do some public speaking on it at a couple of her events. And then that actually got me started on public speaking, and I became a public speaker for about 4 or 5 years. And I traveled across Colorado giving presentations and keynotes.
Beginning in high school.
Yeah, and keynote speeches on anxiety and depression management for students. And, that was, I guess, another form of performance. I got to meet a lot of people. I was on stage and, give this talk. And I just really loved being able to like share experiences with like students or parents. And I remember people coming up to me. I was like, I'm really happy that you're talking about this. My kid is going through something like this. Or a kid would come up to me and I'm like, thank you for going about this, like talking about this. Like my parents wouldn't believe me. And it's nice to know like this is normal. And like there are ways to like, get help. And, it made me really kind of think back on my connection to like early films and movies and just seeing like some of the parasocial relationships and seeing like the different ways that people were able to connect and like create those human connections to characters and share different experiences and stories that, one person might not experience in their lifetime, but, be able to share something that, hey, this other person might be going through that. And it really, again, made me want to find ways to communicate more. And I had considered like doing public speaking as a career, but a lot of other things came up. I felt like the whole industry in public speaking itself is like a whole mess as well. So
yeah, it's not what it should, because you were doing it for the right reasons in the right way. But then to get bigger, I think the right word is bullshit. Like you have to be giving people what they want, which is normally
they're motivational, which is fine. If you need motivation, that's great. But I just don't think charging $250 for like someone to tell you can do it is necessarily. I mean, if all the power to you if you have that money. Yeah, I don't have that money. If you are able to spend for it, like go for it. Like, it's whatever. If you have that money, do whatever you want with it, as long as it's not hurting people. I don't really give a shit. But in my personal opinion, which also means jack shit, but I don't like those kind of motivational seminars, just for me personally.
Odd question, but maybe not odd. Were you tempted to go into teaching though? Because it also sounds like there was a teaching element to what you were talking about.
I did. I really enjoyed. I used to be a tutor as well, so I really enjoyed tutoring. But I couldn't. I didn't know what I wanted to teach. I couldn't. I love teaching. I love tutoring, and I would like teach music. I would teach people hypnosis even. Like I love teaching, and I still do. I never knew what I wanted to do. And so that was always something in the back of my mind. And I was like, but like at my core, I'm like, well, what do I like? What do I want to do? And eventually maybe I could teach it in that, but I don't even know what I would want to teach it. And so coming out of high school, I was, fairly okay in math and science. And so I was like, okay, well, I like being outside, so I like biology, and I like being creative, so what's that? Bioengineering. I could be creative, and I was like, okay, cool. No, it's not. It's glorified plumbing. It's plumbing with an advanced degree. And most chemical and biological engineers will hate to hear you say it, but like the majority of chemical and biological engineers you're working for a larger company to help them fix their like oil rigs and machines to run faster. Like there's a holdup in the valve, and I need you to fix the valve. And you're using a lot of Calc 3 to optimize it, but you're doing plumbing for them.
Right. Or you're designing new, You're
doing kinetics for like drugs. It's, there are some really cool people doing all really cool things with bioengineering, which is what I wanted to get into. And I did some internships for that. Like protein extraction, food extraction. I worked in Brazil for ecological conservation. That's what I wanted to do, was use bioengineering for environmental work, and specifically like carbon sequestration.
Which is
stem cell meat.
So you had a sense of what the world globally needs, right? Because carbon sequestration is kind of the most important. But by the way, I'm just gonna come out and ask, what college?
I went to CU Boulder.
Boulder.
I got a scholarship, and I was like, well, I'd rather, not be in debt.
And it's also a fantastic school.
It is a good school.
It's kind of funny. I don't understand. It must have grown like crazy. Like half the people I know, I'm at the age where our kids are going to college. Like half the kids are going to Boulder.
It's a big party school too, and that was.
But it's also like ranked well in like every department.
We do have a couple Nobel laureates. It's
like my nephew's going to do satellite. He wants to be a satellite robotic engineer, and it's in between Boulder and Georgia Tech.
Those are both great schools for satellite engineering. I mean, we have NIST. The physics department, I will say, is top notch. Physics, space, is top notch at
That's the nephew that went to an IB school. But anyway.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying.
And this fall he'll be a freshman, I think, at Georgia Tech. But anyway.
I hope his credits carry over. None of my credits did. I still got IB credits, but I was like, none of it carried over. So
it doesn't matter.
But I was like concerned to go to CU since I grew up in the town, but it's a very different experience, and that was one of my high school teachers that said, like, going to college versus living in a college town is very different worlds. And it was like, even though I was like,
did you get to live in the dorms and stuff and have that experience?
I love my dad, but man, fuck it. I cannot live with him. I cannot live with my sister. I do not want to live with my family. I love them.
But a big part of college is that dorm, right? It's moving on campus or living close to campus.
I was not welcome in my dorm. I was in the engineering honors dorm, but like I said, I have a penchant.
You wanted to have fun.
I had a penchant for being a little bit of a boat rocker, and the way that they set up my dorm was very culty. And that's a fun fact about Boulder, actually, is we have a lot of cults. I think I've been recruited for. I think 5 cults have attempted to recruit me in my life.
Like a cult, like
cult,
with a
cult. Yeah, we had
the pull 12, you away from all your connections, and
there's 12 tribes, which was in our neighborhood that are like down the block. They run the Yellow Deli and a couple of like other. Like,
is that like left over from the hippy dippy days when Boulder got started? Because it was kind of like.
Actually, Celestial Seasonings tea, the ones with like sleeping tea, that's from a cult. Urantia cult. So the little quotes that they have on the tea bags are actually from their Bible. They're not poetry. It's from their Bible.
Dang.
One of my old mentors, and I say that very loosely because, I would say that very loosely. I had met him at a public speaking event. We exchanged information, and I didn't know this at the time, but I would reach out to him, and he ghosted me for a while. 7 years later, while I was in college, he reached out back to me, and he was like, "Hey, are you still like working through your anxiety and depression?" And I'm like, "Yeah, always. It's a everyday thing." He goes, "I have a great 2-week program for like $25,000." And I'm like, "Oh no, I know where this is going." And I was like trying to get my foot out the door. It was like a 2-hour fucking Skype call. And I remember I was like, so like, what is this program called? And it was under like a fake, business name. And so while he was talking, I was like tracing back the name to it. And it turned out it was originating from NXIVM. The one that just got the Steve something who got indicted for the sex slavery.
Yes,
cult.
and branding women, right?
Yes. And he was their brand ambassador. He was like the face of the PR. And
I could see that. Were they pursuing you? Did all these cults pursue you because you have the public speaking ability? And they're like, wait a minute, if we can pull him in, he's the type who has the charisma and can talk people. Like, you probably felt like good recruitment material.
Maybe.
I bet.
I'm very open. Like I'm very open about like my mental health and my trauma, and I feel like they're like, oh man, this guy's damaged. Let's get him. And I think that's kind of like, this is what the Scientologists too, is like cults and just these programs in general.
You're broken, we'll fix you.
Yeah, they target people who move to new cities. That's why a lot of people who come to LA, they might get targeted by an MLM or a mentorship program. Like, you should come meet our mentors and like retire when you're 29. And they target people who like went through breakups or through, trauma. They want a sense of community. And so they're like, oh, this guy he's kind of fucked up. He's got mental health issues. Like, let's grab him. And I'm like, I grew up around you guys. I think I'm okay. But I don't know how we got, but yeah. So my dorm had very cult-like behavior. And like I say, like fraternities, the fraternity culture, sorority cultures operate very similarly. I don't know if you saw a viral video. It was like a couple of years ago, but they put an old cult recruitment video, like a how-to, over a sorority video, and it blends perfectly, and it's so funny. But
yeah, it's funny. I'm like, I've always been anti-authoritarian too, and whatnot, and a boat rocker. So yeah, like in college and everything, I was like, no clubs, no Greek system, none of that. I had no interest in any of it. I was very anti. It
was like, and exactly what you're saying with like this dorm was it was run by this one guy, fucking Scott, man. I fucking hate him so much. God. There are a few people that I just to my fiber really dislike, but Scott was the dorm whoever ran the dorm,
right? Top RA or whatever,
I guess. But he was like a guy in his 50s.
So not a student, right?
No,
okay.
He was like an admin, but he lived in the dorm with his two daughters. It was weird. I really didn't understand it. But I remember we came in and there was like a greeting thing, and he was like talking, like standing on a podium amongst all the engineers, and was like, "You guys are the best of the best. We chose you because you're like." And I was like, "Who is this guy? Fucking what?" And I remember we had to take, in order to live in the dorm, these were they call it RAP dorms, or residential academic programs. And there was a couple of them. And when you lived in one of them, you would have to take a specific class that went with it. And I didn't know this until afterwards. I'm not really good at reading. I was like, it's fine, whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'll roll with it. So the one we had to take was this thing called Critical Encounters, which was like philosophy. And I love philosophy. I fucking love philosophy. And I remember we walked into class, and it was like a small classroom. It was probably 30 people. And he asked a question, and one kid raised his hand, and he gave an answer. And he goes to the kid, he goes, "You're absolutely wrong. You have no idea what you're talking about." And I'm like, what the fuck? And I was like, maybe it was just this one time. But he kept doing it, and he kept bashing on these kids. And I'm like, if it was one thing, it was if it was math, and still being a dick is not excusable. But I was like, you're also doing it on a subjective topic. That's literally the whole point of philosophy, is you can have a different opinion. It just matters if you can back it up. It's not whether you're right or wrong. It just matters if you can defend it. But he would just come down on these students so hard. And I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? So I would just tune out. I would just kind of disassociate. But I remember, I think a month in, and again, these kids loved this guy. They revered him. It was a cult thing. And so because they knew I didn't care about him, they kind of looked at me. Plus, I smoked weed in the dorms. So I like would hotbox. I remember
before, was it legal yet?
Oh yeah, it was legal. Not at my age, but
right. It's 21 and up. But Colorado was early on legalization, I believe, right?
Yeah, very early on. But you Colorado, they always the big old weed and cocaine, man. So like kids I remember kids in high school were selling fucking coke out of their backpacks. It was weird. It was weird times, man. But yeah, I remember like I would come home from a party and there was like a study hall in the 3rd floor, and I found out later it was an all girls floor. I didn't know that because I was in the West Wing and this was in the North Wing, and just completely stunk up the entire. It smelled like weed for like a week, and I was tight with the RAs though, so none of them ratted me out, which was really nice. So thank you guys. But a lot of people kind of look down on me like, who the fuck is this guy? He's an engineer. He needs to act like it. He needs to like respect. And I was like,
you weren't a typical enough engineering student.
I just didn't want to kiss ass, man. I just really didn't. I don't know. Maybe that's like my BPD, and like I just don't want to, suck up or brown nose. And sometimes it's good. I just have a penchant. I just don't want to do it. But in that class, I think a month in, he was doing a lesson on Socrates, and he was doing a lesson on Socrates' ladders of love, and like what Socrates like considers like, okay, these are the levels of true love and actual love. And we were getting to a topic, and I made an allusion to Taoism, which is what I grew up with, the Tao Te Ching. And I love Taoism, and I read it, and I made it. And he goes, "You have no idea what you're talking about." And he tries to move on, and I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Like I was like, "I do know what I'm talking about. Have you read the Tao Te Ching?" He goes, "No." So I was like, "So you don't know what you're talking about?" And we ended up getting into a 5-minute shouting match. Like we were screaming at each other in the middle of this lecture, and eventually I got him to admit he was wrong. And at that point, I decided to make his life a living hell. And I was just, so after freshman year, I left the dorms. I was just like, I don't want to live with these guys. Doesn't mean like I wasn't a little bratty, petty piece of shit. I was, but right.
And at that school, I guess it is true. The dorms are based on major and whatnot. Like, there's not just general purpose dorms that you could have switched to.
And that was the thing.
You just didn't luck out and go in one of those.
Well, it's just like I thought it was like it was like
that's where everyone was smoking
building.
Weed, right?
Yeah, I guess it was like resume thing again. It was just like kind of that Fairview mentality. It was like, all right, well, this is going to look good on my resume if I can apply for internships or jobs if I'm in the honors dorm. But again, like I knew people in the other dorms and they were fucking brilliant. But they weren't an honors dorm. It's just a piece of paper. And when I applied for that dorm, the only thing part of my application was I had to write an essay, and because I can write, I got in. So like it really didn't matter. But I got to live off campus too, with by myself and with friends, but no longer friends. Man, crazy times. People make that thing like, oh, when you get to college, people mature. No, they don't. No, they don't.
They're kids.
Yeah. No. Even now.
I say that as old. I'm probably around. Well, I'm not your dad's age, but old enough to be your dad's age. But yeah, you look back and you're like, in college, you feel like you're becoming an adult.
Yeah, an adult.
But you're so close to high school.
That's the crazy thing to me too. Is like the way that the U.S. puts their laws of like you're giving a 16-year-old a license to a fucking. A massive killing machine of like a car. And I'm like, and the fact that you never have to retake your license, like driver's test again, unless you like
you just have to redo the written.
Yeah. And I'm like, who does that? Like you have to get like re-registered to go scuba diving, but you don't ever have to get re-registered for a car. That's insane. Anyways.
It's because parents don't want to drive their kids to school. Like it's 16 is just like,
I guess.
Honestly, we can't wait till the kid turns 16 so we don't have to drive her to school anymor.
I guess.
What can I say?
You can die in a war at 18, but you can't have a beer. Like
I know that's the other fucked up one. It's wild.
I didn't know that you couldn't rent a car.
Used to be you couldn't vote, right? They had to lower the voting age because of the draft. with Vietnam.
I didn't know you couldn't rent a car until you were 25. And so I flew out there expecting to rent a car. And I'm like, wait, what? And luckily, my partner, Liz, was like older than me. And so she was able to rent a car for us. But I was like, this is insane. Like, what? Why? I've been driving for so long, but I can't rent a car. But anyways, I'm getting off topic.
True. We're still back at Boulder. But
still back at Boulder.
You've
I went engineering, and that was my hiatus from creativity, and I was miserable. I was so miserable.
There was no time for stuff on the side because
it is brutal. Fucking the engineering department, the chemical engineering department, they work the kids to the bone. It's brutal, and it's also there's some issues with it, with like the way that they accept money from oil companies, and it's a whole bunch of issues, but it's a research school, and not all research schools are like this, but at least with the professors, the majority of professors, some of them actually enjoy teaching, and I love those professors. They were great because they wanted to be there. They wanted to teach the kids, but there were a lot of professors there who just were there for their research, and they were just coming in and they were explaining stuff that was very common to them, but like not common to us. And they weren't willing to like try and introduce and help us figure it out. And they're like, just read the textbook. And I'm like, why am I paying, fucking $40,000 to read a textbook? You're supposed to teach me. This is like the social contract that we accepted. And that was also leading to many arguments. And I had a reputation amongst the department for causing troubles with the professors. And I ran an underground homework ring where we would all exchange homework to make sure that, because they wouldn't help people learn, so people couldn't do the homework. And like I think on average, they would like the demands were like you had to come to class, which was like an hour, and you would do it maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and then they expect you to read the textbook after class, very thick, very boring text. With so much jargon that's so hard to sift through. And then you would have to do a homework, do once a week, and they would give you like 2 to 3 problems. But each problem could take you probably 3 to 5 hours. I was able to complete it in like 3-4 hours. But that's because of like, I would, fucking bomb the hell out of like with the questions with my teachers and other like TAs. I would like hound them on email, like gotta give me like help me out here. But some kids, I remember they were like telling me they were spending, 12 hours on each assignment, and we had like 4 classes, each of them with their own textbooks and their own assignments. I was, this is insane. So I was like, I'm not doing this. And so I worked with some friends. We made an underground homework ring, and essentially like we would all do the homework and then we would all share our homework together. So like we would all do the homework and we would do the problems that were easy to us. But if we got stuck on something, we would look at someone else's problem and see like, oh, that's where I'm getting stuck on. I forgot a negative, or like, cause you're doing these problems that take up like 5 pages. And you get tired. And so sometimes you drop a decimal or you drop a negative and you're like, why is this not working? And then it's just because of some silly, stupid little thing. But instead of banging your head for 12 hours trying to figure that out, you can just look at your colleagues and be like, oh, it's just I dropped a decimal, or that's how they did it. And then it helps you learn because you're like, oh, I don't get it. But now that I see how this other person did it, now this process makes sense. And so you're still learning that way. And in the ring, I was like, don't just copy answers. I was like, that was a big thing. I was like, don't copy answers. Do your own homework. But like, you can see other people's answers and how they got there, but do it yourself.
I'm just going to point out your natural educator was coming out there too, because you were creating a system where people could learn more effectively.
Yeah, I guess.
It wasn't a cheating system. It was a learning system. It really was.
I guess. It was just, and that was the thing, is like lectures is so auditory, and I'm a very kinesthetic learner. I love to learn with my hands and on the jobs. I love to do physical labor. So I grew up in Colorado. I worked on ranches. I worked with horses. Like I worked, with animals. It's just, I learned with my hands. I learned doing the work. And so I learned so much more on internships and jobs than I ever did in classes. And that's the thing. If you're an auditory learner or a visual learner, lectures can be great. But I wasn't. And so I was like, I would rather learn how to do it by watching other people do it, and then, or copy them, and then go back and be like, okay, this is the thing that I don't understand, and this is how they figured it out. You know, it's like asking someone to, create a charcoal drawing when they don't even know the concept of shading. And I'm like, well, you got to show me, like, I don't even understand what shading is. And then if you show me, okay, well, here are the cross hatches, and this is how you do stippling and all this stuff. I'm like, oh, so there are different processes to shading, and this is why you do, this is the process behind light. And then I can go learn how to do this, like, charcoal drawing. And they were just trying to throw us in the deep end without really any instruction. And I hated it. But with all that being said, like, it was just such a miserable time, educationally, I guess, or academically. I loved my friends. I loved the experiences I had with my friends, and I was a competitive swing dancer. I guess that was the creative thing. I was also performing that way. I was competitively dancing, and I was teaching there too. So I loved jazz music. That was the creative side of me. I loved learning just how to create, choreo or improve different crafts on that. But I also was finding that in my free time, I was just researching film, and like, that's what I found fun. I loved watching movies. I loved watching movies as a kid. Again, I was a kind of a lonely kid, so I spent a lot of time watching movies, and it just something I loved. And so throughout college, like, that's what I would do. Like, when I just really didn't want to do homework, I would watch, there's one famous channel that every, young filmmaker probably has heard of. It's like Every Frame of Painting. It's a YouTube channel. The guy's disappeared. I don't know where he's gone. I miss him. I wish he'd come back, but he had great videos, and like, it'd break down different types of film or cinematography from different directors. Or like, one of my favorite videos by him is breakdown of Jackie Chan's action comedy and why his action comedy works versus some other forms of action comedy. And I love those videos, and that's kind of how I spent most of my time throughout college. And then once I graduated, I was like, I knew that I didn't want to be an engineer. I just knew it. I did 2 internships. I'm like, I actually know 3 internships, and I was like, I can't do it. I really can't. I was so miserable, and so I didn't know what to do. And I also went through a really, really bad breakup. And so, for those who don't know, so with BPD, borderline personality disorder, is also known as, borderline came from like a weird term back in the old days of psychology, where they like said like there was psychosis and neurosis, and it was on the border. But basically it means emotionally unstable. So they have similarities with bipolar, where there's like the highs and lows of emotions, but it happens a lot faster. So like, someone who's bipolar might have like a manic episode maybe once a month, and then they go back to a baseline. Whereas someone with borderline personality disorder it happens every day constantly. So it's like the bipolar express. Because of growing up in like an abusive household with a narcissistic parent, my mother had narcissistic personality disorder. I didn't learn how to learn how to understand and express emotions. So I experienced very high highs and very low lows. So as you can see, like, I'll get very passionate about one random, very particular thing. And it's like goes beyond like enthusiasm to like sheer unbridled passion. The same thing could be like if I get sad or if I get embarrassed, it's not like just random, like just like a light embarrassment. It's like deep rooted shame and guilt. But also with borderline personality disorder is some people have is you very risky behavior, like risk-taking behavior. And so sometimes through like emotional, like very like stressful emotional times, you might engage in risky behavior. And so like when I went through a really bad breakup, it was with a partner in Israel. I had worked as an intern in Israel. I met someone down there. And and it was really bad, the breakup. I lost $2,000. She tried to recruit me to her cult, which also, more cults. And I came home and I'm like, I don't know what to do with my life. And I ended up, my neighbor was a fashion designer. She asked me to like model some clothes for her. I did. And then I was like, okay, this is something. And I was like, I need to grab onto something. I feel like I'm free falling. And so I was like, okay, yeah, like let me try modeling. And so I did that for a while. And I grew up with a very poor self-image of myself. So it was also like a cathartic way of like, okay, let me try and regain some like confidence in my self-image. That whole industry is, people know how big of a nightmare it is. And when you're in it, man, it's so bad. It's so bad.
There's a lot of bad people.
Oh, bad people. I was assaulted a couple times. It's bad. It's very uncomfortable. There's so many issues with it. Part of the reason I just don't want to do it. Like I'll still do shoots with like photographers I'm friends with, but I don't want to do it like, anymore. It's just so.
How long did you do it?
Like 2 years.
And did you get out of Colorado and do it? Like, did you go?
No, I was never like really big in it. Like I did it for like small brands or small shoots or stuff like that. But like I was never, again, like we talked earlier, like, coming from a mixed family, I look very ethnically ambiguous, and people are like, oh, well, that's going to help you. No, it doesn't. Because you're not Chinese enough looking for them, or you're not white enough looking for them, or whatever they want. And so
they have to be because they have something on a piece of paper of what they're looking for.
We need 3 Asians for their shoot, and like you're not Asian enough or Asian looking enough. And I'm like, okay, cool.
I know, and people see one commercial with ethnically mixed people, and they're like, see how big that is now? And it's like, there's one for every like 1,000 commercials.
And it's also different. Like the thing is, in Colorado, there was very like smaller brands were like commercials. So there is this film community there, but it's mostly for like commercials. It's not really like film or television. Like, and so like in LA, if like LA does a lot of, commercial work, I guess, like, I forgot the term for it, but magazine work, Gap,
like
Old
print
Navy,
work,
like commercial. Whereas if you want to do like high fashion and couture and all that, you got to go to New York and or Paris or Italy, and those areas they like to look for models who are more unique looking. So people who are more mixed or have more unique facial features will go more likely to New York or Paris because they're going to get more work that way. And I don't want to go to New York. So
right. So you ruled that out.
I ruled that out, and I was like, well, I also just don't like this industry.
Were people saying to you, hey, you could maybe
go to New York? Yeah, and I was like, I don't want to. And I was at the time where I was just like being in even in that small microcosm of a community within Denver, I was like, I just can't imagine being on a bigger set of and I was like, I don't want to deal with this.
All the things you disliked would be times 1,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but in that time, I guess I still have to be grateful for it in some ways, because my agent at the time was like, you should go do this acting thing. And I did. And man, some of these projects, man, back in Colorado were so, I ran into like an anti-Semitic dude, and he fired me because he found out I was Jewish. And I was like, my name is Ari Groobman. How do you not know that? I was like, it's literally like, I've had that on interviews here too, where they're like, they come I pop on the Zoom and they're like, are you Ari? And I'm like, I know, I am Jewish. I promise. I had a bar mitzvah. I don't look Jewish, but I am Jewish. But
yeah, don't get me started on the people who think that there is no Jewish race.
Yeah.
There is, whatever. It
was wild.
You can't win.
And so, but it got me back into the idea of doing film, and as this is there's people who make a career out of this. And I kind of this was when I was doing fine dining to pay the bills, and I had a lot of help from my parents. When I say pay the bills, I also mean like I got a lot of financial help from my parents. Like you can't really, it's really hard to be like a person in the industry without receiving some form of financial help or really just cranking your ass off. And I'm very fortunate to have that help from my father, who's very supportive. Now it took a while to convince him, but I think he's on board right now. But I kind of made that transition. I was like, I can't really think of what else I could do that I would be happy in. And so I decided that I wanted to make the move out to LA. This was also during the pandemic. So that itself, I was like, okay, I wanted to make the move. My partner also wanted to move. We moved out here in 2021 and
you were just like a year or two out of college?
Probably, yeah. I graduated 2019.
I'm doing the math in my head. Yeah, so 2 years out of college. So the whole modeling thing was squozing into that little 2-year period.
Kind of. I started
and a little bit of acting.
I started at the beginning of January 2019, and I basically stopped when I came here to LA because I was like, I don't want to go there. I tried acting for a little bit, but I also I'm not an actor. I'm not. I'm down to cameo and whatever, but like. I'm not. I can't.
But you two moved out to LA really with the idea with filmmaking in mind?
Just film. I just really
film,
didn't
something
know.
Film
I was
related.
like, okay, maybe I'll do acting or something,
Right.
And then I did a couple auditions. I'm like, no, this isn't for me. And at that time I was like writing, I really enjoyed writing and I was like, I've always enjoyed writing. I used to write shorts and poems all throughout high school and college, and I love telling stories, and I ramble. So like people would always say like I would tell stories from different travels and experiences, and people are like, "You really paint a picture," and I'm like, oh, "Okay, cool. Maybe I can put it down." And so started writing, and then after coming here, I'm like, acting really isn't for me, and I have no technical skills whatsoever. I can't hold a camera. Like I make a joke with my DP Ryan on the Essentially Amy when we first worked together. We worked on like a commercial thing I did, and he was asking me a question. I'm like, look, Ryan, I'm just going to tell you, I don't even know how to turn on your camera. So if you just help me, if I can tell you what I would like and you help me figure out how to do it, that'll help. And I've learned more since then, but it was very much a learning on the job, learning as you go process. And so I started just writing, and then I kind of like, hey, this is more like my wheelhouse. This is where I'm, this feels more comfortable for me. The idea of like story structure, and I mean, I loved reading. I loved movies. It just really just kind of, I had very strong opinions on movies and everything. So it just, I just kind of felt like
you seem like a, like just like with the hypnotism and other things, like did you hit the screenwriting books? Did you do that? Did you dive into that?
I did, but like, and I mean, again, I feel like I've said so much stuff that's going to get me so much flack.
Most of them are worthless, right? But,
I guess, yeah. That's again like reiterate to everybody, my opinion means shit, but it's just my opinion.
Yeah,
Everyone's got
your
one.
opinion, totally valid.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I didn't want to go back to school. I was like, I don't want to have to put more like school debt and spend all this money. So I paid a little bit of like a couple $1,000s for like some online writing courses. And the first one, I actually met my mentor, Dana, and she's great. And I loved her class, and I learned a lot in that class. But then afterwards, every class like I took subsequently afterwards, it was the exact same. And I was like, wait, what is going on? And then I read like William Goldman's memoir, and I'm like, and that's a great one. If people who haven't read that, Secrets of Screen Trade or something, it's great. It's a really fun one. He's very self-deprecating, and he's so funny to read. He's a great writer. But I just realized that it was just the same stuff, but just repackaged. And like, if you just buy one book, you can probably figure it out, the basics, and then you learn more just by doing it. And you just learn more by trying to write it, and then you're like, okay, I'm stuck. And then you read some other scripts and you're like, figure that out. And it's very much a craft that you learn by doing it and watching other people do it. And like, you can go to class for it, but it's, you see it's a pattern.
And not just reading scripts, but I mean, I think some of the best advice is just watch films.
Absolutely.
Because you can reach the point where you're watching a film and you're seeing the story structure.
You just
and you're
know what
seeing
you like.
Yeah. You actually don't need to read a script. You need to watch the film.
I mean, honestly, I even say, like, if you don't like a film, instead of just saying, like, I don't like it, sit down and think about why you don't like it. And that's something I always sit down. I'm like, why didn't I like that? Like, I remember, and that's actually one of my answers you have. I don't know if I should save that for later.
No. Save your 4 questions for the next podcast.
I think I forgot. But it's essentially like, I would sit down and I'd watch a movie and I'm like, well, I didn't like that. Why didn't I like that? And I was like, what was it missing? And I was like, well, this is very similar. Why did I like this versus why I like that? And like just doing those little kind of movements of like, you're learning, but you're also, again, developing your own taste, you're developing your own style. And like, that's also why as I've been here longer and like more like just doing it myself, I've kind of been a little bit more open to like, I don't really want to just trash on people because everyone just has like their own tastes and there's not necessarily something right or wrong, like, again, like it's just people have their own taste. I know what I like. And this is, that's how I learn, and I'm learning to develop the things that I like. And so just watching movies and saying like, wow, I really like that. Why did I like that? And even being very honest with yourself. Like if you see a movie that everyone's saying that they love, but you sit there and I'm like, I didn't really like that. Why? Think about it. Or the same thing, the opposite end. Everyone says like, oh, this is terrible. I'm like, I kind of liked it. Why? I think one of them was, I want to say this movie example is not one of my answers for the 4 questions, but Wes Anderson's The French Dispatch. I really like Wes Anderson. I do. I hated The French Dispatch.
My laughter, Ari, no one can see it but Ari, but I just laughed really hard because before you came over, my wife and I were going through HBO Max. I'm like, we still haven't seen French Dispatch. It's the only Wes Anderson I haven't seen yet. I got to watch it at some point, even though I've heard a lot of disappointment about it.
I hated it. I do like him. I do like him, and I think he's very talented, but I was making a kind of a joke is like the big powerhouse directors you see nowadays that people talk about amongst film schools, like Wes Anderson, Nolan, Lynch, whatever. I feel like, in the like Nolan's recent film and Tarantino's recent film and Edgar Wright's recent film, I just feel like they've gotten to a point where they've reached a certain level of fame where I think people are afraid to say no. And so like, I remember when I saw a review on Tenet, it was like, it's not Nolan at his best, but it's Nolan at his most. And that's kind of how I felt about The French Dispatch. It was like, it wasn't Wes at his best, but it was Wes at his most. And I mean, if you watch it, my friend who loved it, she was a set dresser on Essentially Amy. And man, Caitlin is unbelievable. Like she did so much with a limited budget, but she loved it. And we talked about it and but that's her world. She is a phenomenal production designer. And if you go into watching films with that kind of background and that's, what you love, watching a Wes Anderson film is just like sublime. It's so beautiful. And The French Dispatch was beautifully shot. It's the most beautiful of his films. But the story was not there. And that's where I come in. And that's my thing is I love watching for story. Liz loves watching for music. Liz is a very musical person. So she will say, I didn't like that movie because the music was terrible. Where I wasn't paying attention. I was like, oh, there was music. But when I watched The French Dispatch, I hated it because it was like 3 loose vignettes trying to be part of some very weird story they really didn't have any connection to each other. And I'm like, if you wanted to do short stories, why didn't you do something like The Ballad of Buster Scruggs with the Coen brothers? I was like, just do a mini series if you wanted to do small vignettes. But I was like, don't try and pass it off to be like a movie because it's not. It was just, it was, why was I talking about this?
I don't know, but I'm going to tie it. I think I'm going to help out here.
Yeah, please.
What you were saying, not only makes sense to me, but I think the wonderful thing here is you were focusing on, why do you like something? Why do you not like something? But then a reason why essentially Amy, I think, has done so well with audiences is you made it for you. You made it for the right, in other words, you know what you like. And if you try to make a film for other people, it's not going to have the sincerity. It's not going to have the integrity. It's just, honestly, even if, and this goes for Adam Sandler. Like, I don't mean to shit on Adam, but like, if you want to film about a bunch of doofuses, shitting in a pool, Adam's your guy.
Yeah.
And he shouldn't try to make a Wes Anderson film, but he's making it the way he loves it. Yeah. And that's why it resonates with that people audience. Who love that.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you were very focused. You have a focus on understanding what you do like and what you don't like, so that when you turn around and make your first film, you're making it for you.
I mean, I'm still learning. I mean, people always would critique Tarantino for stealing, and I don't know. I've always kind of said creativity doesn't exist. I said, originality doesn't exist. Creativity exists, because it's so hard in the concept of human storytelling and history of that you come up with a completely original idea is absurd. It's just really kind of figuring out, okay, how do you repackage it? And for example, I think I remember this literally just happened a week ago. Everything Everywhere All at Once. I loved it. I really did. I mean, for many reasons. I love the kung fu action that just hit me so hard with I grew up with Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and I love that. I love the slapstick comedy. I grew up with the Marx Brothers and the Three Stooges. I love Michelle Yeoh. I mean, there's so many things of the heart that came from being in an Asian family, that hit home for me so hard. But there are
the
a lot of
mother-daughter
reasons.
relationship is so well done.
And I loved Wayman. I always forget his name, but who played in The Goonies and Indiana Jones. I loved him, and he was so phenomenal. Jamie Lee Curtis, I remember when I first saw her, I just cackled. I was just couldn't believe the character she was playing, because I think the last time I had seen her at that time, I think I was rewatching Knives Out, and just seeing her from Knives Out to this, I thought it was just so funny. But it all the press was talking about how original it was and how unbelievable it was, and I'm there was a lot of things that was very creative about it. But if you break it down, the story itself, it's about an unlikely chosen hero who's so bad at everything. And that's been done before. And if you look at the Lego movie, 2014, literally the whole joke of the Lego movie was that here's this very normal Lego guy who's not good at anything, but because he's not good at anything, he can be the special one. And that's...
the Daniels put in how many Easter egg Matrix references?
Yeah.
Because it was their way of saying, we love the Matrix and we know we're ripping off the Matrix, but we're doing the Matrix for fun. We're doing a fun version of it with the influences we love from martial arts cinema and this and that. And they owned it. The fact that they put references to it made it that much more it's completely creative and original to be inspired by other work
their way. And they talk about it. They talk about all their inspirations, which I appreciate. I've always really disliked interviews where people talk about their brainchild is they've never seen it before, it's never been done before, and I don't know, I always just kind of roll my eyes. But I love that. I don't know if you saw it recently. It came out in winter, but Bad Santa, or it was the guy from Stranger Things. The father character or the police character?
The cop? I didn't see his Santa. Bad Santa was that the Billy Bob Thornton thing, right?
Maybe.
It was something, though. Yeah, I remember. Yeah. I didn't see it. Or no,
Violent Night, maybe. I think it was Violent Night. And I remember watching the trailers, and I'm it's just Die Hard with Santa. And I was this could be either really good or really bad. And I went with my friend Ryan, my DP, and Liz, and I had a blast, man. It was so funny. And that was the thing. It was literally, they were making fun. It was literally just Die Hard with Santa. And they just leaned into it, and it was so fun. They weren't taking themselves too seriously. They're like, we're just going to make Die Hard with Santa and Home Alone like booby traps, but like turn up the gore and turn up the violence. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm all for it. It was a wild ride, and I had so much fun.
I'm with you 100%. And I mean, I guess this is trite of me, but Shakespeare himself would have told you, I'm not making these stories up. It all comes from somewhere. Like it's not some, he just kept going to history and said, I'm going to re-dramatize something I know from history. Like it's
how many star-crossed lovers stories have we seen?
I mean, it's just the requirement. The requirement is to do it well.
Yeah.
Right. And when you mention Tarantino, when people shit on him and say he's derivative, it's like
he stole from somebody.
He does it well.
He does it, and he does it well, and he does it in his own way.
Yeah, he has his own voice.
And that was the same thing with writing Essentially Amy. Like, I wrote it with, I think at the time when I wrote it for a different grant program. And the grant program I went with, like, that accepted us. So the process of making it was kind of interesting. I wrote it for a grant program, Hillman grad, and it was a very rough first draft, but I submitted it, and they didn't accept it. It was just kind of sitting on my shelf. I had worked with Ryan on a different project. We had made like a commercial. I was trying to do like a small startup business with like a board game, and I just...
like a spec commercial
like
or
a game. Like, yeah,
a commercial for the game?
Yeah. It was a commercial for a game that I created, and I just... I ended up, I was like, it wasn't, we did a Kickstarter. The goal was 10,000. We made like 9,000. So we didn't, I was like, I don't really want to continue this. Maybe later, maybe if down the line, but I really enjoyed working with Ryan, and I really liked working with him. And I was like, hey, do you want to like do something together? And so he was like, yeah, sure. And so I sent him a bunch of scripts, and that was the one he liked. So we're like, okay. I was like, and at that time, I had only made like 2 shorts before. And again, like the first short I did, I had no experience. I made it with my friend in my apartment, 9 hours. It was like a short horror thing with no dialogue even, because I was like, we don't want to have audio, and just, we did that. And then my second one was with my roommate Eileen, and man, oh man, was that a nightmare. That was like one of the worst sets I had ever done or been on, at least on my own end. I have been on much worse professional sets, which is, seeing, like, I was like, oh yeah, I'll come to Hollywood and like everything's going to be so professional. And I'm like, why is this like legal? This feels illegal. I remember a producer had asked me to like shoot one of the talents with like a confetti gun, but it had like compressed air, and they're like, shoot it at him. And I'm like, no. They're like, oh, just do it. You're a PA. And I'm like, no. I was like, have you tested this yet? And he goes, no, it's fine. And I'm like, this is compressed air, man. Like, it's got a fucking rubber stopper on the end. I'm not going to shoot it at him. And the other PA did. And he shot him in the arm. And there was a big ass welt. And I was like, yeah, I'm glad I didn't shoot him. But I was like, how is this legal, man? The second short, it was a nightmare with Colorado weather. Those who've ever been in Colorado, we joke that if you don't like it, wait 10 minutes. So it was an outside shot. It was an exterior shot, pretty much. At least the script had it. And I had to, on the 2 days that we had scheduled for it, it snowed the first day, and then it was 70 mile per hour winds the second day. So I literally, like, at 6 a.m, like, try to make up how to, like, put it in my apartment. We had no costumes, anything. So it was so run and gun, but great learning experience. But with those two, like, being done, and then with the commercial, and then I had done, like, a film festival with my other friend Xavier, and again, I just, like, it was just when I moved to California, so, like, I didn't have anything. I didn't know anything. So it was also very early work. So I just told Ryan, I was like, look, I'd love to do this, but I can't do it by myself. I would need like a producer. I need someone to help me out with this. And that's when we got to meet Mitch, and that was our producer on the set. And Mitch, Ryan, and I were basically like us trio were the ones who created Amy. So I want to give out a shout out to like Ryan and Mitch, because man, I couldn't have done it without them. And Mitch was just so on top of it. He was so good with the organization and like getting things done. Like, cause I didn't know how to do stuff like permits and all those things. And so,
yeah. And you had written locations that you can't steal very easily.
No, like I couldn't cheat it. Like I could cheat the home and that's what we did. We shot in my old apartment. And Caitlin did a great job set dressing it. I couldn't recognize it. But with the grocery store, like, we couldn't rent a studio to like a fake grocery store, and like finding a grocery store is not cheap.
There aren't really independent groceries like you would. Yeah, they're all corporate owned, and they're not going to let you steal.
They won't. Like we tried to go to H Mart and they wouldn't let us film it. They were like, we refuse. And I like, they wouldn't give us the reason. And I was like suspecting maybe they had a bad experience in the past or whatever. But
everyone in LA has had a bad experience with a Zadley. There's no way to explain to them that your crew won't fuck shit up.
Yeah, pretty much. And so it was like for a couple months, I think we started in like July or August of 2021. And I was just going to pay out of my savings. And we were like, it was a very, very almost no budget. I was like, I just wanted to make something. And I applied for this grant. And Mitch was like, you can try it. I don't get your hopes up, and completely forgot about it. Then winter came, a lot of shit hit the fan, lost my job. I was like in a very I want to get this done. And we were almost like 2 weeks from shooting, and we were like in this really tiny grocery store, maybe 600 square feet. We were going to try and make it work. Very like whatever equipment Ryan had on hand, very slim crew to none. And then we get a call back from the grant, and I was like, you're in the finals. And I was like, what? And then like a week before we were supposed to shoot, they're like, hey, we want to give you the grant. Like, you're one of the final 5 people. And I was like, this is insane. And I was like, well, how much is it? And they're like, $25,000. And I was like, I called Mitch and Ryan. I was like, holy shit, what do we do? And they're like, Mitch was like, immediately, he was like, we're pushing it. Like, we're going to push it. We got to get a better location. Now we have money. Like, let's get a good crew. And that's what we did. So like, we told the actors, and like, we let everyone who was already on board at the time know. And we were like, hey, so like, and they were all for it. They're like, cool. Like, let's really try and get as much production value as we can, out of it. And so, like, we all forewent our payments, and we were like, let's funnel it right back into the project. And so we found like a grocery store. We got a bigger budget for set dressing, and same thing with post. Man, post is expensive too. And Olivia, my editor, was great. And like Hua, who did the music, was phenomenal. Like, there's so many people I could just sing their praises for. I mean, again, that's like a lot of the thing is like, and a lot of people, when you see these things like in like these interviews, but also like on, I see it in the Academy Awards and Golden Globes. It's always like the director, but man, oh man, is it such a group effort. And I was so green. And, here I'm working with a lot of people who were like vets, in their own ways. And, that's something I feel like needs to be said more, is just how much credit is dispersed. It just really needs to be dispersed. And like, I really could not have done it without all these people. And, we got it done. We like did it in like, we shot one full day at my apartment, and then we did 2 overnights, and those were brutal, man. Like 9 p.m. to like 6 a.m. Back to back.
Because that's the only time you could use the market.
Yeah. And it was exhausting. And then we did like, Olivia and I did like a month of editing, and then there was, we had to do some ADR, and then there was music, and then there was sound mixing and all that stuff. But finally we got it out. And again, like I'm really happy with the finished product, but there's always things I'd love to like going back. And that's what everyone says. It's never about when it's finished, it's when it's good enough. And it was kind of like, all right, it's good enough, let's get it out. And Yeah, no, and that's kind of leading up to this very long anecdote stories, traversing across my vast opinions on hypnosis and IBAP, whatever. But that's kind of how, Amy got made, and
do you consider yourself a filmmaker now?
no, of course not.
You won't give yourself that.
Deep imposter syndrome. Deep-seated imposter syndrome.
Yeah, but I probably say this too often, but I mean, I've heard Taika Waititi talk about his imposter syndrome. Like, everyone's got it, so you might as well just say, the truth is.
I put it on my resume. I put it on like my social media stuff. Like, it was the fake it till you make it mentality.
But you actually didn't make it. You made something.
I made something.
You made something, and you made something good, and it is a collaborative medium. So it might be the collaborativeness of it that makes everyone feel like, ooh, everyone else is, you know what I mean? Like, It's hard to take credit when you know how collaborative it is. But
I can take credit on the idea of the story. It's something I wrote.
I can promise you this, and I say this as someone who's been around indie film for, well, fuck my ass, 30 years or so.
Wow.
Is that same crew of wonderful people who made essentially Amy so well, they could have made a piece of shit with like the same script and a director who had his head up his ass. Like, that's totally true.
Yeah,
I'm sure they'd all tell you like it came out well. Like you were integral. I don't know what I'm trying to convince you of something.
I appreciate
but I'm going against your nature. I understand.
I guess I don't know. My dad was very he was always my sister. He was a very humble man too. He's very successful, but he's always been very humble. He always dressed humbly. Like, I don't think I've really ever seen him. I think I've seen him in jeans. Maybe I can count on my hand. Like, he usually just wears sweatpants. Like, he's very humble. He doesn't care a lot of things. He just wants a car that works. He doesn't care about fancy shit. And that's just kind of like how my sister and I grew up. And, I always admired that about him and tried my best to like kind of stay as humble as I can. But, like with the film, like Ryan's cinematography, Mitch's organization, I mean, maybe it could have been shit, but like, they did a lot. They did such a great job. I mean, Caitlin too, and like Olivia is just such a natural editor that like, I remember I admitted to her later, like we did like a full circle, like she had done an edit. And I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. And then after a month later, I'm like, you were right the first time. I'm sorry. Like, let's go back. But I guess I was helpful and I was grateful for her to let me go through that process of like, let me try this. It doesn't work. Okay, let's go back. This is better. And it helped me learn. And I'm very grateful for that.
For sure, and it helped her get to see it both ways too. I mean, it's there's always a benefit to it, and it's a process.
I love it though. Like that's the thing, and we were talking about that because we've all worked on sets, different projects where like because I do my job as a PA too sometimes, and I've been on sets where you just see the director who is just so like a producer on set too who just runs it with just such a tight fucking grip. And it's so miserable. It's a morale thing, and that's what I've told people like who've asked me before about like what was it like directing, and I'm like, you gotta think of it like a captain of a ship. Like you trust the person who's handling the sails to handle the sails. You trust the person who's running the brig to run the brig. Your job as a captain is to make sure those people are happy, and you make sure that those people can communicate with each other well. And that everything is coordinated. But it's so much trust, and it's like being able to also be open to what people say. Because like I said, like I was so green. I never went to film school. I didn't know how to turn on the camera. So if I said something to Ryan, he was like, I think it should be this way. I'm like, okay, can you tell me why? And like we talk about it, and I'm like, okay, we both see differently. Let's shoot both ways, and then let's see how it works, and then we figure it out from there. And that's just how I've learned. And I think again with that mentality in mind, it's like I loved it, man. There was so many times we had jokes that just And that's the thing that I with my imposter syndrome, when I'm like writing still now and like watching movies, I'm like, man, oh man, like how did they get that joke? It's so funny. And then I read the original script and I'm like, that wasn't in there. And I just forget how many stuff just comes during the process. So like with people who are writing their first draft, and it's something that I have to constantly tell myself, because I'm still struggling with writer's block and all that stuff, but your first draft is not going to be your magnum opus. It's not. And so much of like the things that came on, like with that was funny about Essentially Amy, just like came as is. Like the face masks on all the characters we designed to be fit to their personalities. But that was something we came up with. Like, I didn't think about that when I was writing. I just had them have face masks, but like later down the line, we were like, oh, this would be fun. And I think one of the lines, I had a different line. I remember, for the opening scene where Amy and Jules are talking about the bottle of ketchup. But I had a completely different line in there. It was like, I think it was like a hot sauce. It was a different joke. And while we were doing a location scout, we were like trying to figure out what was the best place to, do that scene. And I saw a bottle of ketchup and I made the joke of like, she can say something like this. Oh no, ma'am, that's ketchup. And both Ryan and Mitch laughed. And I'm like, oh, that is actually funnier. And so we went with that one instead. And so it was like, so much of it was also just like kind of as you went along. And Olivia, like when we were working on the behind the computer, just like different tricks with editing and things. I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing, you could do that. And I was like, that's awesome. And like, so they have such a wealth of knowledge of like, it's hard to like, again, sometimes you can't make a joke because you don't know that you can make that joke, or like you can do that thing because you didn't know that was even possible. But here's this somebody who's like, yeah, I know all the editing tricks. Like, and then you increase your vocabulary, it's like learning a language. You learn a new word and now you can add a new word to your, like, I guess I'm so tired.
Yeah, no, your vocabulary.
Yeah, your diction or whatever you want. And so now you have a new tool, and that's something that's so fun.
And the cool thing, a very cool thing about film is you almost no one knows everything. No. So there's always new tools, and it's always new, not tricks, but new methods and new technical things popping up. It's pretty. You can understand how people have such long careers and stay interested because there's always something different coming along. It changes
so fast too. Like I've talked with mentors, and I'm still very new into it, but like talking with mentors, how like the film industry just changes year by year. It's so fast. And like that's the time is like if you can't adapt to it, it can be really treacherous because it just changes so quickly. And it's funny because like people talk about like, was it the 20 or 30 year cycle where like things pop back into like fashion, so now Gen Z is like really into, I think it was like 90, what do they call it? Was Y2K fashion. And I'm like, for me, it's kind of concerning. I'm like, why is that now like considered vintage? That kind of freaks me out a little bit. But, like we had that big boom of like It and Stranger Things and all these movies taking place in the 70s and the 80s. And so now a lot of the writers who grew up in that period are trying to pay homage to that time. And so I think as we go on, we're going to see more movies taking place in the 90s and the early 2000s because, that's just how the generation of workers come and like the cycle of like these people who go into the workforce. And then like stuff from the 80s that were in fashion are now brought back in as the people who grew up in the 80s now are back in the workforce. And they're like, okay, now I want to bring that back because I love that from my childhood. And then like, it becomes a new thing, but it's different and et cetera. So I think that's the same thing you see now with film too, is like we had such a big boom into like the digital world and so much was just all plain digital. We wanted clean. We wanted all these clean things, but then people are like, wait, it's too clean now. Like I think I saw a video essay on YouTube of someone like looking at like the Spider-Man, the third one with like Tom Holland and all the other Spider-Mans.
All three Spider-Man ones.
I loved it. Like rewatching it, like, yeah, you know, it was so much of like being in the theater and the theater experience that really made it. And I think that's why I really enjoyed it, because rewatching it at home, it just wasn't the same. But man, Willem Dafoe, man, what a phenomenal actor. Oh man, he just killed it. Him and, why am I spacing his name? Andrew Molina. Is that
Alfred Molina?
Alfred Molina. Man,
yes,
he's
Doc
fantastic.
Ock. Yeah. Just he's always amazing.
He's great.
Yeah, I know that's one of the beautiful tricks that filmmakers can do is always make sure you write a part for someone over 60. You know, basically, because the caliber of actor you get.
Amazing. And just, man, like I will rewatch that movie just for those clips of them in there, just because they just fucking make it. But the essay was talking about how like a lot of the movies feel and Marvel's just feel too clean. It's kind of a little boring. It's just kind of it feels very sparse and hollow.
It's sterile.
Yeah. Sterile. That's a good word for it. Yeah, sterile. And then they compared it to the new Batman movie, which, you know, there's parts of it that I liked, parts of it I didn't like. But the thing that I did really like about it was the cinematography. The cinematography in that new Batman film was beautiful. And they talk about like the dirtiness of the lens, where like on the edges it was a little bit more fuzzy. It wasn't always so crisp, and they played with the different shots. Same thing with like a new blockbuster that came out, Bullet Train. It was just fun. It was a fun ride. Like, I think people were bashing on it, but I'm like, look, it's just that's another thing is like, also, man, I don't know. I'm going to go on so many rants now, but like just hearing so many people talk about like, only, again, I love A24, man. I love A24 films, but like this kind of pretentiousness that also comes with film too, and like indie films, and they're like, oh, you know, it's blockbusters, man. Like it's a studio made. I was like, yeah, but some of them can be really fucking fun. I don't know if you saw Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
No, I want to,
it's
but
so good.
The first one was superb.
It was like, oh, I if you see it. And I would love if you could text.
Our kids saw it with her. That's the problem, man. They get in high school and now they see the films with their friends instead of you. And now like I have to wait. Is it on streaming?
It's on streaming.
I'll see
what's
on
it.
streaming.
It's like $21 right now.
I'll wait till it's included, of course.
I mean, honestly, I bought it. It's worth it. It's so good. And if you have a chance to text me whenever you watch it to let me know what you think.
I mean, that's one of the amazing things about. I don't know what it is about animation. I think it's because it's such a labor-intensive process once you have the script done that the scripts are always so good.
I feel like it's a different medium, and it's something like I hate musicals, and like I get a lot of flack for that. I'm
with you, basically. Yeah, I pretended to like them for a little while. I can't. There's no reason to sing.
The thing is, like, I love The Sound of Music. That was fine, and I guess that's a musical. The Blues Brothers, I love that too. But, you know, I really just don't like musicals. And I was like, for the longest time, I was like, well, why don't I like it? Why do I just dislike it? And it's like, I don't like them singing, but like I do like these other musicals where people are singing. Why is that? And it came to an idea. It was like, I've enjoyed musical in person. The active live performance is amazing. Being in person and seeing a play or being in person seeing a musical is such an amazing experience. That's why also people say like the transition from theater performance to screen performance can be very tricky for some people, because the people in the theater, you have to project to the people in the back of the stage. But in the camera, you have to keep it very closed in. You have to keep it subtle. And that's why like some people will overact from theater to film. And you have to treat it as different mediums. So if you're trying to adapt a musical from a theater to a film, you need to address that a film is a very visual, like it's a very visual medium. And that's why I think animated musicals do so much better than live action musicals, because when animation, in that medium, there's that suspension of disbelief. And you have to suspend your disbelief that these drawn characters are real people. Like this talking cat is a real person. But you suspend your disbelief to be able to be part of the story. And so if they break out into singing, it's kind of silly, but you're already suspending that, oh, here's a talking cat. Like, I'm okay with this. That's why I was like, if they did Cats as an animated musical, I'm sure it would have done a lot better than if they did it as a live action. I'm not saying I think Cats itself has its own weird the whole story issues, but whatever.
I mean, I got my own opinion on musicals, which is that the musical style that is Broadway is often just bad music. So every once in a while, there's a musical with good music, whether it's like I love Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I love Cabaret.
Chicago?
I like Chicago.
Yeah.
What's the jazz one? Midnight in Paris? Not Maybe. Midnight. That was Woody. Well, An American in Paris or something. But it was Irving Berlin wrote the music and it was jazzy. So if the music is good, I can enjoy it. Yeah. But if it's if they take the film Waitress and adapt it and just give it Broadway style, just ba 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 ba.
Like that's why I never wanted to watch the Shrek musical or anything like that.
It's fucking terrible. Yeah. It's fucking because the music itself sucks.
It's just also the thing is like
that's why Book of Mormon was good because Trey Parker is actually a great songwriter.
Yeah, when I saw Liz was trying to get me to watch Chicago for the longest time, and I told her I was like I hate musical movies. I hate them. And I watched it and I actually really enjoyed it. But the reason I remember I enjoyed it was because they catered to what made theater amazing. This is a silly thing to think that people break out in song, but they were kind of taking place in the protagonist's heads, these fantastical visions of being on the stage. So they would do these great elaborate set designs and performances that captured the kind of the I guess extravagance of the song. And I'm like, okay, I can appreciate this. They're taking full advantage of you couldn't do this type of performance on a real stage. So you're taking advantage of the visual medium and doing a really good transliteration. That's why I also think like plays to movies are really difficult because play is so much, you're on a limited set. If you're in theater, you have to use your imagination. So a lot of times playwrights will have these long monologues because you're there with the actor. You have this like almost, there's no physical barrier between. So you have this like really intimate connection with them. So you're able to listen to this very long monologue that can be really enhanced by the actor on stage. But then if you do that to the movie, like straight to movie, without any like use of the visual medium, and you just have a camera pointed to one guy talking for like 5-10 minutes, it doesn't work. Like, I love Chadwick Boseman, may he rest in peace. And his performance in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, I really didn't like that. I loved the story and the concept. I loved the play. But seeing adapted it to screen, I didn't think they utilized the full wealth of the visual medium because they would just go on these long monologues between the characters in this back room communicating with each other. And that would work great on a stage, which it does. But just filming people talking with each other is so hard to do unless there's like some type of banter or layers to it. But if you just have one person talk for on and on and on and have like one shot, not even change up the angle of the shot, it doesn't translate. I was like, I'd rather just go into the theater and watch it like in person than just see it on the screen.
For sure. In fact, there are times when I say after a Q&A to a filmmaker, I'm like, have you thought about making that a play? Because sometimes it'd be a better play.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I should hit you with the what? Are you still writing? Are you planning the next film? Are you got?
Yeah,
I assume.
Oh, man.
Amy gave you whet your appetite for more.
It was definitely a burnout. I definitely have been going through. Oh, no worries. You okay?
Did I say anything that sounded like SIRI? I don't think so.
Definitely like the Amy, I was very burnt out afterwards. And so I was going through like a really deep, like seated period of writer's block. And my mentor recommended me The Artist Way by Julia Cameron, Martin Scorsese's ex-wife, which I recently learned. But she's a great writer as well, and I really loved her book, and it really helped me. It was like, there's so many self-help books, but like this was very helpful in being one saying like, I'm going to use fruity language because that's how I think. And if you don't have to think about things in the same way that I do, but the tools are still there. So if you just read it, take the tools, ignore the fruity language if you don't like it. And that was like her foreword. I'm like, cool, I'm for that. Like, you know, you're not gonna, you know, it's just like being very honest, and I appreciate that in writing. And the tools she has were like super helpful, and it just slowly brought me a little bit out of it. I'm still kind of in it, but I didn't write anything for like months, for a long time. And then I wrote like 3 shorts, and I'm writing on like trying to finish this feature that I was like playing in my head since Amy. It's like a horror comedy, I guess. I don't know. I'm still like trying to figure it out, but as I go. And then one of the shorts my mentor really liked, so she suggested I like try to turn it into like a 30-minute, an hour-long pilot, stretch it out from like 10 pages to like a treatment. And then there was another pilot that was started, and then I hit a block. I was like, I don't know where to take these characters. I don't know what I'm trying to say with this. And then I recently, like, again, it's just like just something fell in my lap of just like a different thing like happened in my life where it just was like, okay, now it's like I'm unblocked finally. You know, it just happened. And so I'm still there. We just moved to NoHo, my partner and I, with our roommate. And so like there's so much unpacking. And so it's also fighting the procrastination demon of like, oh, I want to write, but man, there's so many boxes I need to unpack and blah, blah, blah. And so like it's just trying to go back and forth. But I think one of the biggest helpful things also has been starting a writer's group with my friends.
Huge.
I was very adverse to it. I was like, well, I don't want to be around strangers. Like I just, you know, I don't want to like, I don't know. I like meeting people, but there's like something about like mixers and networking events, and it just felt like a weird networking event where people were just going to like start bragging about themselves. And I'm like, I don't want to be, that's just going to make me uncomfortable. But then I was like, my mentor was like, well, just do it with your friends. That's what I did. And I'm like, oh, like, it's so crazy. I was like, I never thought of that. Like, oh, I could just do it with my friends. I don't have to find a writer's group. I could just do it with my friends. And we did. And it's great. And I loved it. And it's been really nice to be able to like work through people and share stuff with people so that I can like, oh, here are other writers who can give me like genuine, really good critique. Because if I give it to my dad, he's my dad. He's going to love it. And like, you know, even if it's shit. Or like my partner Liz, she'll give me really good feedback, but she has a certain wealth of knowledge, and it's really helpful on that side. But then there's this whole other aspect of knowledge that I need help with, and so it's good to hear it from a writer, another writer. So hearing it from that side, they're like, okay, here's something that you should look at writing-wise. But like Liz can be like, here's something you should look at like set-wise or character-wise or something like that. So it's just, you know, good to have like a whole vast different group of opinions.
For sure. Sounds good. And it's a great way to stay in touch. And there's nothing better. And I assume you read aloud with the group.
Yeah.
Because reading scripts aloud is a big fucking deal.
Oh, yeah. Table reads, man. Like, I think sometimes people don't do that, but like.
Separates the wheat from the chaff.
That's seriously, there's so many movies. I'm like, did anyone read this out loud before they filmed?
You can tell when they don't.
Yeah.
You can tell.
I was like,
for sure.
I remember that fucking one line from Interstellar where like Anne Hathaway, who gave such a great performance. She is a great performer, but that whole speech on love, I'm like, did someone not like have her read this into like a group of people? Or like the Suicide Squad, I can rag on that for hours. But like some of the dialogue, man, I'm like, did no one read this? How did it go through so many people and no one was like brought up of like, maybe we should like rephrase that, or like maybe we should like fix that.
Fucks not given.
I guess, man.
Fucks were not given. All right, well, I clearly want to get to your opinions. Yeah. So anything else you want to add, or should we wrap it up? So we can wrap
it up. We can go to the opinions. I know.
We can get to the 4 questions.
I can keep
for
talking,
those who don't know. After Ari and I wrap this up, we're going to actually record a second podcast, which is going to be a quick one where he answers the 4 questions. which I won't even name right now. But is there a website or anything for Amy or for yourself that people should check out, or social media?
We haven't done like a social media or website yet, because we're still trying to figure out how the film, like the studio that Creator Plus, who gave us the grant, they're still waiting to distribute it. So it's not released quite yet. But if you want to like stay posted on like the Amy and just if you're interested in like me never posting on social media, you can follow my account. It's just my name. It's Ari _Groobman, Groobman. And yeah.
And I'll make that clickable in the show notes, even though it sounds like you don't update it much. No need to.
I mean, I'm so bad at it. I'm just not great. That's part of the reason I was terrible at modeling.
My social media is the occasional guinea pig photo.
You have a guinea pig?
Oh, we have the cutest guinea pig in the world.
Goodness.
I'll introduce you to him when we're done. He's the cutest guy.
Oh man, I love animals. Yeah, I'd love to.
We settled on a guinea pig since I'm allergic to cats, and the ladies in this house somehow aren't big dog fans. And well, actually, there's a longer story why we have a guinea. But anyway, all right. So, right, Ari _Groobman is where people can check you out. That'll be a clickable link. And now I will go on my closing spiel so we can get out of here. You have listened to the Discover Indie Film podcast. This podcast actually gave birth to a TV series on Amazon Prime Video. So if you want to check out absolutely fantastic indie short films handpicked from the festival circuit, just go to Prime Video, hopefully on a nice big TV. Open up that app on a smart TV. I'm aware that people watch films on their phones, but I really hope you don't. But anyway, just open up the Prime Video app and type in Discover Indie Film. It'll autocomplete at some point. There's 7 seasons, although by the time this podcast comes out, season 8 might come out, and season 8, amazingly. All right, so Ari, you did Ballroom. Season 8 is 100% dance films.
Really? That's so cool.
I got invited to be a guest, someone who had a dance film in one of the festivals, I think in 2020, might have been 2021, and she started a dance film festival in Exeter, England. So it's Edith, Exeter Dance International Film Festival. And she said, Jeff, would you like guest curate like a section?
That's awesome.
And I was like, how many films do I have to watch? She goes, just 10. I'm in.
Easy.
Because I told her how much I love dance films.
Yeah. Did you watch like over like a couple thousand or 700 different films for the Sherman Oaks one? Last year?
It's about 800 for Sherman Oaks.
That's so much. Because each of them could be like 15 minutes. Like,
well, I start all 800.
Oh man,
I don't necessarily finish all 800. You can tell, but I stick it out a little longer than is comfortable sometimes.
Yeah.
But anyway, so season 8 of Discover Indie Film is going to be all dance films. Very proud of them, mostly from Europe, but from all around the world. Beautiful, beautiful works. So keep your eyes open for that. If you want to learn more about the podcast or the TV series that was born from it, just go to discoverindiefilm.com, and it's at DIF Wins on social media. I'll add, because I'm just crazy and I can't stop myself from trying to get these wonderful indie films seen by people, I did start a smart TV app / streaming service.
That's cool.
You don't know about this. This is going to tie into another topic that you brought up back in Boulder. It's called TVHi, and the website is called watchtvhi.com, TVHi, and it is all indie films curated so that it's wonderful to watch when you're stoned. Now, I will add that I have friends in recovery. Please be responsible with drugs. If you can enjoy marijuana or other drugs, whatever you like, in a way that doesn't harm your life, please watch TVHi. And if drugs are rough, by the way, all the films are great to watch sober.
Oh yeah, but it's also fun.
But there's a little extra. It is being curated so that they all have that little something that when you're stoned, it's just like, whoa, it's better.
Just, you kind of like let go with it.
And actually, this podcast is probably coming out late enough because we're going to have like a big launch on 420. Right now, it's soft launch while Ari and I are talking, but by then we will. And actually, it's already on Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Android TV, iOS and Android mobile. So the TVHi app, if you type in TVHi in an app store, you will actually get the streaming service.
So if I go on Google, like, because I have a smart TV.
It's on Google Play, yeah.
On Google Play?
Yeah.
I got to write this down.
You got it. And by the way, if you want to subscribe, if you go to watchtvhi.com, it's $4.20 a month.
That's fine.
$4.20 a month for tons and tons of great indie films. So, and if you get it through an app store, it's actually $4.99 because they don't let us do the cool $4.20 thing.
Oh.
So, but join any way you like. But I feel very strongly that all the films are really wonderful and it's great. So anyway, so there's that. And then we talked about the Sherman Oaks Film Festival, so I'll just close with film festivals. Sherman Oaks Film Festival is every November. You can learn about it if you go to ShermanOaksFF.com, and it's at ShermanOaksFF on social media. Its sister festival that we hold every June is Film Invasion Los Angeles. You can learn more at FilmInvasionLA.com, and it's at Film Invasion LA on social media. And I'm proud to say both festivals somehow are ranked in the top 100 best reviewed worldwide.
Amazing.
Out of 12,000 festivals in the world, I happen to be the head programmer of 2 of the top 100 best reviewed.
I had a blast. I really enjoyed it. This is last November. This is this is my first time on the circuit, so I had a blast.
Yeah, and thank you. I appreciate it. It's a fun festival, and it's got good people. I still can't figure out why everyone's so nice.
Yeah, I don't know. Everyone was so friendly. The atmosphere was super just easygoing. It didn't feel stressful. It just was fun. It was just fun to watch indie films and people making movies.
And pat myself on the back.
Yeah.
I can not be too humble. It's so well curated. Like, you didn't see a bad film. Like, you came to a lot of films.
Yeah, I came to a lot.
And they're all fucking good.
And they're all across the board. There were just so many different types too. Like there was.
Yeah. We don't have a theme. We don't have a genre.
No.
Everything. If it's good, it's in.
Yeah, you just saw like there was comedy. There was like art house. It was crazy. I loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, Ari Groobman, thank you for being here. And we're just going to jump off and jump back on, but I'm going to thank everyone for listening.
Thank you all.